She is really oblivious. It's obvious that younger women are better." My mother-in-law proclaimed triumphantly, snorting with pride. "Indeed, that young woman is cute and has glowing skin. I think the girlfriend my husband found is really attractive. But maybe it's just her looks? He he he. My name is Jenny. I am 45 years old and I love gourmet food when traveling. However, due to the recent COVID-19 pandemic, my travels have decreased and I have been passionate about making street food style dishes at home. I've made delicious, juicy pork ribs and enjoyed homemade pizza. There is always a beer beside me. Ah, it's the best. As long as there is delicious food, I truly feel I can overcome any difficulty. However, there has been an incident that even I thought was too much. It happened in my 30s. When I came home for Christmas, my mother-in-law suddenly said, "Are you and your husband not getting along well?" My husband choked upon hearing this. Indeed, we had been having a fun conversation about meals with the family, but I was surprised to be suddenly questioned about our marital relationship. "There's no such thing." "Right. Oh, what are you suddenly bringing up, Mom?" "Hey, you two have been married for 2 years now, and I'm worried because you still don't have children." Ah. Haha, I did not clearly respond to my mother-in-law's words, only managing an ambiguous smile. Honestly, I have a strong aversion to such topics being brought up by my in-laws. Even though we are family, I wish they would respect our privacy. Both my husband and I have jobs and have been busy since we got married. While we do want children, we also want to devote energy to our work. Although maternity leave is allowed by company policy, it doesn't function well in a male-dominated workplace. There is little understanding for women who take leave, and effectively, there is an unspoken agreement that if you have a child, you should resign. We had almost used up our savings for the wedding, and there was not enough financial leeway for me to resign and still sustain our lives. Thus, my husband and I have discussed that it's okay to have children a bit later, and we have mentioned this to my parents-in-law numerous times. However, we are continuously pressured with, "Women have limited time, you should have children soon." They don't listen to our opinions at all. So, each time we visit home, the same topic is mentioned, and it has become a regular event. By now, I thought it best to get used to my insensitive in-laws and handle them casually, but a certain incident significantly changed my perspective. It was at the end of the 3rd year of our marriage. "Why don't you two consider getting tested for infertility?" my mother-in-law suggested, handing us a printed page from an obstetrician's website. She pointed to the reviews printed in detail, saying, "Look, most people who received treatment at this clinic got pregnant. People who didn't get pregnant probably wouldn't write reviews so easily. It's unnatural not to find even a 3-star review, let alone bad reviews. All the reviews are 5 stars. Such consistently high praise for the hospital makes me suspect that the clinic might be hiding unfavorable reviews." Yet my mother-in-law continued to rave about the excellence of the hospital to us without any suspicion. However, since she had not actually been treated there herself, she was just reading the reviews as if they were her own experiences. After a long time of not being able to have children, we started going to this clinic and were able to get pregnant within 2 years. The emotional support is also perfect. It alleviates any anxiety about childbirth. It was as if she was advertising for the hospital. Normally, my husband and I would just smile wryly and ignore this talk. It can't be helped. To make sure we're not infertile, let's get tested, my husband suddenly said that. He must have thought that if it was clear we were not infertile, the persistent demands would stop. I agreed with my husband's suggestion, and we decided to get tested for infertility. The test results revealed that I had infertility issues. Of course, it could be improved with treatment, and it didn't mean we could never have children permanently. If we really want children, then paying for treatment and actively trying to conceive would be a good idea. However, I was the only one who took this fact positively. "That's why you should have married a younger wife," my mother-in-law said, crunching on a cookie after hearing about my test results. My father-in-law also expressed his disappointment, saying, "It's sad to think we might not see our grandchildren. But it's not certain that we can't have children," I argued, to which my mother-in-law replied, "But you need treatment, right? How much will it cost? How long is the treatment expected to take? You are already 34 years old, aren't you? How much older will you be by the time your infertility is cured?" I was at a loss for words because I had felt this way myself. Unlike my mother-in-law, I had thought that maybe we don't need to go through treatment to have children. I could never say this out loud. In fact, neither my husband nor I desperately wanted children. Children would be lovely, but we thought it would be nice if it happens, or let's leave it to nature. We were not very upset even after the infertility diagnosis, and we did not take it as seriously as my mother-in-law and the others did. Age-wise, I had become an inconvenient presence for my in-laws, who assumed I could not have children. After the results, there had been jokes about us divorcing and finding another wife who could have children. Of course, my in-laws were not smiling. Fortunately, my husband always supported me. No matter what my in-laws said, he firmly responded, "We didn't get married because we wanted children. Don't even joke about that." My husband is an only child, and I understand his parents' desire to see their grandchildren, but childbirth and child rearing are my responsibilities. As my mother-in-law says, it indeed takes courage to give birth and raise a child as you get older. I have always resisted the idea of having children for the sake of my husband's parents, so I am deeply grateful to my husband for supporting me in this respect. I was truly satisfied with marrying a wonderful husband, but another challenge was about to test me. After my father-in-law passed away, my mother-in-law, who disliked living alone in a large house, suggested, "Why don't you live with me?" I really wanted to refuse this internally. I did not think badly of my mother-in-law, but I felt it was her own doing because of her previous sarcasm. I shared my feelings with my husband, but he was leaning towards living together, saying, "Mom is getting older. I don't think I can get along with your mother if we live together. I understand how you feel, but aren't you worried about leaving an elderly mother alone?" "That's true. But you understand that your mother doesn't like me, right?" "That's a different matter. What if, for example, She slips on the stairs while living alone. Dad used to be there, but her knees are weak. At her age, it wouldn't be strange if a life-threatening accident occurred. I was shaken by my husband's unusually stern tone. When I remained silent, my husband asked, "Since when have you become so cold?" I understand what my husband means, but I question myself if I really said something terrible. Despite my mother-in-law's repeated unpleasant remarks, my husband defends her simply because she is elderly, and I am enveloped in frustration. We repeated this conversation many times, and my husband never accepted my opinion, eventually leading to my mother-in-law frequently visiting our house and gradually starting to live with us. Looking back, it was clear that it wasn't my mother-in-law pushing herself on us, but my husband who had invited her. Indeed, my mother-in-law only came when my husband was at home, and I had no choice but to let her into our house. Eventually, my husband said, "This house is too small for us to live with my parents," and it was decided that we would move to his parents' house. This was probably the plan from the beginning. I was unaware that I had completely fallen into the trap planned by my husband and mother-in-law. And so, it was decided for us to live together with her. "Jenny, thanks for working until late, but please get dinner ready quickly." That's what she said, rushing me to prepare dinner when I came home late. Ah, yes. From the time it was decided that I would live with my mother-in-law, somehow all the household duties had become my responsibility. As mentioned earlier, both my husband and I worked, and when we lived alone, we shared the household chores. However, since living with my mother-in-law, she reprimanded me for letting her son do household chores and declared that I should fulfill my duties as a wife, making all the housework my sole responsibility. My mother-in-law herself does not work and spends her days relaxing at home. Even though she receives a pension, my mother-in-law spends it all on herself without contributing to our household expenses. Meanwhile, my husband and I had an arrangement where I paid for groceries and other daily expenses, while he paid the rent. Strangely, this arrangement has continued even after we moved into his parents' house. Ultimately, I am the one paying for both my husband's and mother-in-law's living expenses. My husband no longer needs to pay rent, and he spends all his income on personal expenses, which have become quite extravagant. He frequently buys new suits and even suddenly bought a new car, even though he previously had no interest in cars. When I ask for the living expenses to be shared, he only replies, "We're not living extravagantly, so your salary should be enough." My mother-in-law constantly argues that a wife should devote herself to her husband, and my husband often agrees, saying, "That's right." I witnessed the change in my once kind husband. My mother-in-law was harsh on me daily, voicing her dissatisfaction for various reasons. "Why do you serve such salty food when I have high blood pressure?" she would complain. And if I showed the slightest resistance, she would scold, "So ungrateful. Do you even realize I'm allowing you to stay here?" Her bullying was like a scene from an old drama. Despite feeling this way, I tried to ignore it. However, I was mentally and physically exhausted due to my busy work schedule and the lack of rest at home. Moreover, my husband no longer supported me. As time passed, he sided more with his mother and became increasingly arrogant. He would silently hold out an empty glass, demanding a drink, and showed willingness to comply with everything my mother-in-law said. Once my mother-in-law demanded, "Drive me to meet a friend at a cafe." That day, I was sick with a cold, suffering from a headache and a slight fever. Lacking the energy to drive, I honestly told them, "I'm sick, so I need to rest," but my husband scolded me, saying, "Don't be mean to my mother." No matter how much I explained, my husband wouldn't listen, and I ended up driving my mother-in-law. As a result, I had to pick her up too, and the next day I was down with a high fever of over 100 degrees and had to take a day off from work. Despite sacrificing myself for the family, no one took care of me. They avoided me, saying, "You might infect us," and told me, "We'll eat out." No one went shopping, so I ended up without food for 2 days, hardly eating anything while suffering from a high fever. My relationship with my husband deteriorated over time, and I thought about divorce. During this time, my company assigned me to a long-term business trip to inspect our overseas branch. The assignment was for 3 months, effectively making it a solo assignment. This opportunity seemed good to distance myself from my husband, and my allowance would increase during my overseas work. Thus, I gladly accepted the business trip offer and left for overseas, despite my mother-in-law and husband's complaints. When I returned from abroad and entered my home, I heard strange noises from the living room, including voices of my husband, mother-in-law, and an unfamiliar woman. Wondering what was happening, I walked into the living room. Suddenly, the unfamiliar woman exclaimed in surprise. My husband stood next to her with a frozen expression, and my mother-in-law, with a heavy sigh, placed her hands on her hips as if to say, "It's hopeless." I couldn't understand the situation at all. Who is this?" No one answered my question. They only averted their eyes. I asked again more forcefully, "Who is this woman?" Although I nearly knew the answer, my intuition told me so. At that moment, my mother-in-law looked around at the two of them and said, nodding, "There's no problem, right?" "You really are oblivious. It's obvious that a younger woman is better." My mother-in-law laughed. "That statement, you're acknowledging that my husband is having an affair, right?" "Yes, that's right," my mother-in-law answered. As my mother-in-law stood boldly, my husband looked uneasy. Should I take that as the truth? Then I pressed sternly, and my mother-in-law and the woman urged my husband, "Tell her that's true." With a complicated expression, my husband admitted, "My mother is right. As you can see, Jenny, you no longer have a role here. From now on, Katie will be my daughter-in-law," my mother-in-law declared, embracing the woman named Katie. "Katie is only 20 years old, has no fertility issues, and unlike you, who are older and may find childbirth difficult, Katie has the potential to have many children. We can finally meet our grandchildren." My mother-in-law laughed contentedly, and Katie blushed and smiled shyly. My husband simply couldn't keep up with my mother-in-law's and Katie's excitement. Eventually, my mother-in-law pressured her son, "You have complaints about Jenny, don't you? Say it now." Finally, he spoke up, "I want a divorce. You understand, right? This house needs a young woman who can have children. Just disappear quickly," he declared all at once. After finishing his statement, he looked satisfied with himself. Watching this, my mother-in-law and Katie applauded, turning the environment completely hostile against me. However, I had already reached a certain realization. This woman, I had seen her before. She was definitely that person. I laughed to myself. They know nothing. They should enjoy kicking me out while they can, because it's just temporary happiness. Oh, how pitiful. Hey, that woman. Haven't you seen her somewhere before? Huh. In response to my husband's surprised face, my mother-in-law coldly mocked me. Are you making excuses? Meanwhile, Katie stared at me with wide eyes, her expression tense. You know about the Ross residence, right? Huh? Ah, yes, I know it, but what about it? Does it matter now? Does it really not matter? Recently, there have been rumors around the Ross residence about a young woman frequently coming and going. Katie, was it? Him. You look very much like her, exactly like her. At those words, my mother-in-law suddenly let go of Katie's shoulder and stepped back. My husband also exclaimed softly, then shouted, "Who would believe such a lie?" The Ross residence is a well-known luxurious house in this area, and no one knows the specific details of the business conducted there. But the house has a gate and surveillance cameras and sometimes guards, giving it an eerie, fortress-like atmosphere. Although their faces are not similar, the house is home to many stern-looking men, and the particularly grim-faced master is called boss by everyone. All the cars visible from the outside are black luxury vehicles, and the nameplate emits an indescribable eeriness. Because of such an atmosphere, even mischievous elementary school students passing by the house do nothing and quietly walk past. That is the infamous Ross residence. Again, no one knows the specific industry of that house. However, the local people tacitly understand it as that kind of thing. That says it all. Mother, you have lived in this town for a long time, so why didn't you notice? Oh, is it because I was pushed to take over the community work? Too bad, I said sarcastically, smiling at her, and she glared at me with a perplexed expression. If you do something wrong, it comes back to bite you. Thanks to my taking on the unpleasant role, I got my hands on various pieces of information. There's no way Katie is involved with such people. Show me proof. If there's no proof, I won't believe it, my husband declared to me. Indeed, there is no proof. It's not like I knew Katie was having an affair and followed her around taking private photos like in a story, I replied. You're just a liar. You're being persistent in trying to avoid a divorce, he retorted. My mind is made up. Let's divorce as you wish. I earned well during my business trip abroad, and I finally decided on a new place to live. You might not have noticed, but I've been preparing for a divorce for a long time. Shut up. It's not you who's leaving me, I'm the one leaving you, he snapped back. There's no need for such arrogance towards a wife you're divorcing. How narrow-minded. But it's all right now. The connection to the Ross residence is scary, isn't it? I want to proceed with the divorce as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Katie was smiling throughout. Her maintaining a calm demeanor without saying anything seemed to validate my words. Well, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I proceeded with the divorce preparations and left my in-laws' house, but a certain thought grew stronger, and a week later I called my husband to meet. What's the idea of suddenly calling me out? You still have feelings for me, he said provocatively. Just come along, we can talk after that. I led him quietly to a certain place. You really are heartless. That's why you're being divorced, my husband remarked. Why should I show affection to a man who's about to divorce me? I retorted. That attitude of yours is the problem. Wait, where is this? My husband lost his words halfway through. Notice anything? I asked. Hey, you're not thinking of taking me to the Ross residence, are you? That's not happening, my husband objected. There shouldn't be any problem. You yourself denied any connection between Katie and the Ross residence, I pointed out. Ah, right, my husband admitted. So just prove it boldly. Show the evidence that Katie is innocent, I suggested. Well, yes. Even if we go to the house, Katie shouldn't be at the Ross residence at this time. Why shouldn't she be there at this time? I inquired. Katie is taking care of her sick mother and she's a college student. She works at a bar at night, but right now she should be either at college or with her mother, my husband explained. She works at a bar at night, I noted. Hey, what's with that look? She's not just some nighttime woman. She hates working at the bar. I'm going to support her from now on, my husband defended. Hey, Mim, if you say so, I responded. His enthusiasm for Katie didn't stop there. His story continued at length, settling into a summary of a middle-aged man passionately pursuing a relationship with a college student he met at a nightclub, who's in an unfortunate situation. This story really bore no fruit. My husband had met her just before I went on a business trip. A mere 3-month relationship. Her sick mother? And the fact he coincidentally met a beautiful college student. Each episode was too perfect to believe. But setting that aside, as I listened to my husband's story, nodding occasionally, the Ross residence came into view. The grand gate made it impossible to see inside. I said to my husband, well, it might take about 3 hours. It's suspicious in front of the house, so if you wait on the bench in the park across the street, you can see if Katie shows up. 3 hours, my husband exclaimed. Indeed, it was a long wait. But I continued. It can't be helped. If you want to go home, you can. But you also want proof that Katie is innocent, right? Otherwise, you'll always be bothered by it. My husband pondered this. It seemed my point hit home. In the end, without clearly saying whether he would wait or not, he stayed with me at the spot. As a couple about to divorce, we spent a long time together with barely any conversation. In the silence, about an hour and a half later, the gate of the Ross residence opened. It was my first time realizing that the gates of this luxurious house opened automatically. Oh, such incredible wealth. The gate opened, but no car or person appeared. As we feared harsh treatment from the residents for our apparent surveillance, we continued to watch. And then, "It's been a while, let's go somewhere together." "Sure, it's been a while since I walked," said Ross, appearing with several men and Katie. Seeing the two of them arm in arm, my husband's face turned pale. "Keck, Katie," he shouted and, without thinking, ran towards Katie and Ross. As expected, my husband could not approach them and was immediately restrained by the men. For these sturdy men, a man like my husband posed no threat, and they half smiled as they dismissed him. "What's this guy?" Surprised, Katie stopped him. "Ben, why are you here?" Katie: "Who is this man? Are you betraying me? To address my daughter so casually, you've got some nerve. What?" At that moment, Katie gave a wry smile, and although I couldn't see my husband's face, he was probably pale. Meanwhile, Ross, showing a broad smile I had never seen before, was gripping my husband's collar. The men restraining my husband seemed even stronger now. The hostility towards my husband was clear. "Daughter?" "Yes. Any complaints?" "No, not at all." "Ha ha. What a lovely daughter." Initially, I also mistook Katie for Ross's lover, but she was indeed his daughter. That was a shock. The men also referred to her as misconfirming it. I was surprised that such a beautiful woman could be the daughter of a man as imposing as Ross, but upon closer inspection, her distinct features did resemble his. Women wear makeup, so their natural appearance can look quite different. "Huh? That means my husband." "Who exactly are you? You didn't try to mess with my daughter, did you?" While saying this, Ross pulled on my husband's collar even harder. A thought crossed my mind. Is that what this is about? This is scary. "I'm sorry, I've been seriously dating your daughter," my husband exclaimed with agitation. Ross continued to stare at him with a stern look, as if sizing him up. "Seriously dating, you say? What are you talking about?" "Please, don't make me laugh. Actually, I am this man's wife." "What?" Despite the overwhelming presence of the men around us, I stepped between my husband and Ross. Once I appeared, everyone but my husband was stunned and couldn't move. You dared to fool around with my daughter." Ross, furious, slammed my husband to the ground. My husband desperately pleaded. It's not true, but the fact that he had an affair despite having a wife did not change. Silence. "You'll regret messing with my daughter." "Wait. Katie. She said she needed to take care of her sick mother and couldn't marry until she graduated from college. I planned to get divorced by then and have everything arranged." "That makes no sense. I'm already divorced from my wife and my daughter isn't a college student, so you plan to play a double game for years." "What? Oh." My husband was stunned by Ross's response. He seemed shocked to learn that she was neither a college student nor had a mother. "Well, I had a feeling about that. Given her sophisticated makeup, she didn't seem like a college student." "Katie, were you really lying?" my husband pressed. After a wry smile, Katie replied, "You shouldn't take a woman's words at face value, Ben." "What is the truth, then? Why would a daughter of such a household work in that kind of place?" Most of it was a lie. Working at that club was sort of a social experiment, but now that my father has found out, I have no choice but to quit, Katie explained. Ross responded to her puzzled look with, "That's only natural." However, it seemed he was not angry about his daughter's actions. From every move she made, it was clear that Ross deeply loved his daughter. Didn't you love me? Katie only responded with a wry smile, avoiding a direct answer to my husband's question. It probably felt to her like they had just been dating for a little while. It appeared she was under strict control from her stern father. For my married husband, perhaps she was just a convenient affair partner. If she was a child from such a family, even if sued for damages, she wouldn't need to worry. Her father would surely take care of it. Anyway, don't think you can mess with my daughter and get away with it. While saying this, Ross again strongly pulled my husband's collar. Even if Katie agreed to the affair, it was an unreasonable situation. However, as a wife who was cheated on, I actually felt a sweet victory despite keeping it a secret. Just as Ross was about to hit my husband, Katie intervened. "Dad, that's enough." Following his daughter's words, Ross, after a brief conversation with her, said, "If you say it's okay and let my husband go," signaling to the men around to release him too. Unable to move from fear, my husband was on his knees, tears in his eyes. Since my husband couldn't stand up due to shock, I took him back to his parents' house, and that day's events were resolved. A few days later, help me. Suddenly, my husband contacted me on my cell phone. What happened all of a sudden? As far as I'm concerned, I want to proceed with the division of property first. We can talk about that later. Please, it's urgent. Katie came to our house. What about it? Aren't you two supposed to be separated after that incident? I was going to do that. Please, I'm desperate. Get involved. I couldn't help but think, why should I? But at the same time, curiosity stirred within me. This could get interesting. I had no intention of helping my husband, but driven by curiosity, I headed to his parents' house. There, Katie, my husband, and my mother-in-law were all arguing in different ways. Please, I can't be in this house anymore. Why? Didn't you two want to have children? Actually, I'm pregnant. How do I know if it's really my child? What are you saying? At that time, I was with no one but you, Ben. Oh, this is. Listening in, it seemed that Katie was pregnant with my husband's child. That must be why she came all the way to his parents' house. Since my mother-in-law had partially accepted her into the family already, the pregnancy itself wasn't surprising. However, my husband apparently did not want anything more to do with Katie and was reluctant to accept the child as his. How can you expect me to believe that? I'm not even sure if you ever loved me. How can I believe it's my child? As my husband shouted, the atmosphere around him froze. I was there as a detached observer, but it wasn't the time to chime in with, "Hey, look who's here." Still, when my husband saw me, he looked relieved. "You finally came." I want to make things right with my wife. Just give up. What? I have no intention of that. As I frankly stated my true feelings, my husband frantically pleaded, "Just cooperate with me for now." Even knowing it was a lie, it was hard to accept. Katie, I no longer have any interest in this man. So if you really are pregnant, you should make him take full responsibility. As I said this, My mother-in-law shouted, "Don't butt in. We were trying to welcome you back into the family." Huh, what are you thinking? You guys are the ones who will be in trouble if I refuse to remarry. What's with that attitude? Well, Mom. Please don't make Jenny angry. Sorry, Jenny. Considering the situation, it seemed both my husband and mother-in-law were showing respect towards me. That actually felt pretty good. What's that about? You're really too much. Katie muttered quietly, facing down, speaking the plain truth. True to Ross's daughter. As she spoke, both my husband and mother-in-law froze. Her anger must have gotten through to them. Just as the two tried to make excuses, Katie picked up her phone and said, "I'm sending Dad over," then hung up immediately. Anyone could guess what was about to happen next. My mother-in-law slumped down, saying, "It's over," and my husband tried desperately to comfort Katie, but it was too late. Once she took offense. Within 10 minutes, a black car quietly stopped in front of my in-law's house. Several robust men got out and quickly shoved my husband and mother-in-law into the car. "Stop. Jenny, please help," my mother-in-law cried, tears and snot running down her face. My husband also pleaded, "Please call the police. Call the police," but before he could finish his sentence, the car carrying them sped away. Did I call the police? Absolutely not. I pretended not to see because I didn't want to get involved. A few days later, I received a call from my husband to discuss the division of property. Thinking that we were finally getting divorced made my heart feel lighter. I couldn't help but smile throughout the negotiation. My husband had been reluctant before, but on this day he agreed to everything I said. As a result, the division of property and the compensation turned out very favorably for me. I avoided receiving any money from Katie, feeling it too risky, but my husband took care of it instead. It took some time, but I feel it was the best possible outcome for my divorce. Meanwhile, my ex-husband was in a sorry state that day. His arm was fractured, and his arms and legs were covered in bruises and wounds. While his face was strangely unscathed, every little movement he made let out a small cry of pain, indicating his body was severely injured. He was listless, and during our conversation, he hardly said anything beyond yes, or that's right, making the divorce discussion surprisingly smooth. My mother-in-law had no physical injuries but stared into the void with a vacant expression and hardly spoke. I don't want to delve into specifics, but anyone can assume they were treated roughly at the Ross residence. Having escaped that situation, my married life ended as I had hoped. Later, I met my husband just once more to sort out some belongings, but my mother-in-law had broken down mentally and was almost like a vegetable. My husband seemed psychologically cornered as well, and the sight of him caring for my mother-in-law was truly pitiful. The Ross residence seems to be paying compensation, childbirth costs, and child support. However, when I recently saw Katie, her belly wasn't noticeably large. Whether she was actually pregnant remains unclear, but given that household's nature, my husband and others probably wouldn't dare contest it even if they knew the truth. There's a saying, "Let sleeping gods lie," and it's exactly about not meddling with things one shouldn't have touched. Meanwhile, I was offered a promotion and a position at an overseas branch by my company. Yes, it's the same branch I visited on a business trip. I had been offered promotions before, but I declined due to family circumstances making full-time work difficult. However, following the divorce, I decided to fully enjoy life. Accepting the promotion and working energetically abroad, I returned to the US to receive even more promotions. Furthermore, a younger colleague who worked with me on a project unexpectedly confessed his feelings. Did I remarry? Actually, I've had enough of marriage, and I'm not officially dating him. We do go out to eat together a few times a week, though. People around us might think we're a couple, but that's not the case, or so I'd like to think. He says he'll wait until the boss gives the okay, calling me boss, which is quite endearing. It's been 6 years since his confession, and while my heart has inclined towards him, I still want to be cautious. Do I feel sorry for him? Certainly, there are times I feel that way. Sweet, poignant emotions stir my heart occasionally. If the project we are working on together succeeds, I intend to respond to his feelings. Perhaps the day will come when my role changes from boss to Jenny.